Everybody wants to manifest the dream life. Almost nobody's willing to do what it takes to actually get there. And what it takes has nothing to do with working 100 times harder or affirming harder, or really anything to do with the external. The work that manifests your most preferred reality isn't physical, it's energetic and spiritual. Because the truth of the nature of reality is that we're in a game predominantly based on frequency first and logic second. That's why you keep breaking your head against the wall of resistance every time you feel like things are finally about to start working out for you, only to watch all of your progress crumble before your eyes. What you thought was about to be your biggest breakthrough moment transforms into deeper disappointment and uncertainty, and ultimately, you're still not making the money you want, experiencing the freedom you deserve, wishing that everything could be different. The problem is, you're playing an energetic game with logical strategies, confused about why your manifestation mantras haven't worked yet. They don't work because using them is backwards. It's like playing hockey with a mop and then getting pissed that you can't score. No shit, you can't score, you're using the wrong tool. And I know my one-on-one client, Mark, is really gonna enjoy that reference because his brother played professional hockey in the NHL. Mark is the one that manifested $3 million after a single call with me. In any case, there is a tool that actually allows you to manifest with ease. And in a previous video where I broke down the book Reality Transurfing, I mentioned it. I said that creating union between your heart and mind requires one thing. And many of you commented that you wanted a deeper dive into what that one thing is. The one thing is healing, and this is that video. And no, I'm not talking about like the corny spiritual theatrics of crying on camera and being vulnerable on Instagram like your favorite influencer guru does. I'm talking about the metaphysical mechanics behind how attraction actually works, because until you heal, you cannot manifest. And so by the end of this video, your healing process will be complete, because you'll understand what I teach to my clients that completely eradicates resistance and force out of their reality, so that world-class results naturally follow. Part 1. Frequency reset. You already know how to manifest. It's just being blocked. To clear the block, you don't need to vibrate 10 times higher, you need to reset your frequency. Let me explain. For context here, in the previous video that I mentioned where I broke down the book Reality Transurfing, part 8 of that video covered heart-mind union, which in a nutshell, the key to manifesting your most preferred reality is activated through the union between your heart and mind. When your heart and mind are in a state of coherence, you access higher intelligence that creates a vortex of magnetism around you that attracts all of your desires without you having to force your way through. The key to creating coherence between these two faculties is to heal, because the doorway to manifestation is accessed through your heart. If you haven't watched the Reality Transurfing video, tap the link on the screen here and go watch it after this so that everything comes full circle. Now, in a sense, to better internalize how to reset your frequency and what that even means, think of acquiring the ability to manifest exceptional outcomes, not like a skill you haven't learned, but a natural function you were born with but simply forgot how to channel it. The truth is, you are manifesting right now. You've been manifesting every single day of your life, whether it looks like winning or losing, whether you're conscious of it or not. Because manifestation isn't something you try, it's something you're always doing all the time. Your reality at this exact moment is the precise, uncompromising reflection of what you believe your world to be at the deepest level. Not what you say you believe, not the affirmation you wrote on a sticky note and chanted in the mirror, but what you subconsciously believe underneath the performance of believing. Now, the problem that 98% of people have with this is that they're manifesting exactly what they don't want, and they're confused about why it keeps happening to them. And if you're watching this, chances are that's exactly what you're experiencing. Without knowing anything about you, I can already assume that you've probably read many books on this subject. You've most likely watched countless hours of content relating to manifestation. I'm sure you've done the vision boards and the gratitude journals, or even did some kind of spiritual retreat. And at the very least, you've meditated a couple times. And all of those things are good, right? Like, you're searching for solutions and learning new things along the way, that's good. However, if we're being completely real, do you feel like you're actually winning the game of reality at the highest levels, or just processing the same patterns over and over and over again? In other words, are you actually receiving your manifestations and embodying world-class energy, or Are you finding yourself addressing the same energetic themes, yet not really breaking through to the next level? If the honest answer is endless processing with little to no observable materialization of your manifestations, you need to activate what I call a frequency reset. You see, the truth is, at the highest levels of spirituality, you are a god over your own reality. God is not some entity that only exists in the sky and nowhere else. It embodies and encompasses every aspect of our universe, even all the way down to the tiniest atom you cannot see. And you are God experiencing itself. We're all born with an inherent connection to source consciousness that grants us the power and ability to determine our realities and how we choose to experience it. And what you choose through your beliefs, emotions, thoughts, and actions determine the results you see within your physical plane of existence. Said differently, you have divine control and power over your world to manifest your most preferred circumstances. And the only reason you don't get what you want is because you forgot how to channel it. That's why I say frequency resets, because you already know how to do it. You're doing it every day. You're just doing it backwards in a negative direction. Think of the connection between your body, mind, and soul like a computer. If your computer is riddled with viruses because you've been downloading hundreds of hours of hentai porn, like I know some of you are doing, then yes, your computer breaks down and crashes constantly, and you can't even get simple things done efficiently. You get so used to the viruses being there that you become adjusted to how slow it's running until you finally hire some tech nerd to debug your computer and restore it back to its normal functionality. Now, in your mind, you feel tremendous relief by how much faster the computer runs now, as if you just got a brand new piece of hardware or did a RAM upgrade on your computer. But it's the same computer as before, it just works like normal now. The connection between your heart and mind is no different. Resetting your frequency and realigning your heart and mind has almost like a sense of euphoria at first, because you've become so comfortable operating at like 20% of your power that when you do find the other 80% that was always available but never accessed, you feel like you have superpowers. But that's kind of the point, right? Like, those are the factory settings of your mind and soul when you're in a state of godlike coherence. It's not about vibrating 10 times higher or processing emotions and traumas forever or doing your 47th ayahuasca ceremony. It's about healing to the degree that your processing is complete and you feel that godlike connection at all times without having to prove it. That's a proper reset, meaning you wipe the slate clean and dissolve all energetic blocks. Now, at this point, I'm sure the question popping up in your mind is something like, okay, Jose, I get it. I naturally have the frequency of God somewhere in me. However, I still don't feel that level of confidence yet. Why? Like, what am I doing wrong? Well, you're not doing anything wrong, and there's two answers to this. The first is that there are likely unconscious patterns that have not been identified that are still blocking you from receiving this information. Those are called blind spots. We all have them, myself included. In fact, this is why I'm such a big advocate for self-investment, because blind spots are invisible to you. However, when I sit down with a client and we get on a call, I can identify within a few moments precisely what subconscious patterns are still in the background so that we can bring them to the surface and eradicate them entirely. And at this point, I'm so ridiculously fast and efficient with my process, which is why you see such exceptional manifestations in accelerated time frames in my clients, because I'm one of the best in the world at this point. Now, if you're a 6, 7, or 8-figure entrepreneur and you know the thing preventing you from breaking through to the next level is not a strategy problem, but an energetic one, tap the link in the description and apply to work with me, and I'll have my team leader Arjun reach out to you. But without knowing anything about your life or your business, I can almost guarantee that the one thing preventing you from seeing the bigger picture, resetting your frequency, and healing completely once and for all is what the whole purpose of healing is in the first place. Every healing modality, every technique, every new concept surrounding healing work serves one major purpose. And if that purpose isn't fulfilled, it's because the work hasn't cemented deep enough into your subconscious mind to fully receive what I'm about to say next. The one core intention that healing is designed to facilitate is part 2, forgiveness. Forgiveness is the goal of all versions of healing work. Manifesting a breakthrough in reality is the effect created by the cause of embodying a frequency of forgiveness. The dictionary definition of forgiveness is the intentional, voluntary process of letting go of resentment, bitterness, and the desire for vengeance towards someone who has wronged you. But the etymology traces back to an Old English word, forgiveness, which I'm probably saying that wrong, it sounds so funny, forgiveness, which at the time it meant to give up the desire or power to punish. Not to necessarily excuse or forget what someone did, but to let go of the negative emotional charge of the experience. Forgiveness is two-directional. You forgive yourself and you forgive others who have hurt you. And genuine completion of your healing process centers around reducing all negative emotional charge. Put a pin in that for now. We're going to circle back to this later on. Now, unfortunately, one of the biggest contributors to disconnection from a forgiving frequency comes from religions. Every major religion talks about forgiveness as the core medium for accepting the truth of God into your heart. That's not a coincidence. They're all pointing to the same truth in that accessing your highest vibrational frequency, the frequency where you enter the kingdom of heaven and become a lowercase God over your own reality, is actualized through genuine forgiveness. But the way most religions talk about forgiveness is conflicting. Christianity, for example, teaches you that you were born a sinner, and only through Christ can you find salvation. But that's not exactly what Jesus said in the Gospels, though. The born a sinner dogma came later through Paul's teaching, not Jesus. Jesus actually said the opposite. In Matthew 18, he said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." You're not born a sinner, you were born with a pure frequency, and the world caused you to stumble. Now, I'm not bringing this up to turn this into a theological debate. Christianity has a lot of good in it, and I respect everyone's right to choose what they believe. However, where institutionalized thought structures, like religions, cause misalignment in their adherents is with their insistence that you are separate from God. You're not, and that couldn't be further from the truth. They create separation from God and make you fear the devil, worried that you'll lose favor with God if you make a wrong choice. They teach their followers that there is one specific path to connecting with God, and all others will lead you directly to hell. They make sweeping assessments and predictions about what the afterlife may look like and how we're near the end times, and pressure their followers with the notion that you better follow our religion before it's too late. They're using fear, guilt, and shame as marketing tools to get people to follow strict rules for what makes a godly man or woman. And the idea that you were born a sinner gets seeded into most people's minds before they're even old enough to really understand what it means. And it's no wonder people have such a hard time healing and forgiving, because they're being told their entire life that any deviation from this one thought form will cause them an eternity of pain and suffering. But the truth of the matter is that at the highest levels of spirituality, even the most evil people in human history are still children of God. Good and bad are only relevant in the dimension of man. In the kingdom of heaven, there is no good or bad. Everything simply is what it is, because the source consciousness that created the entire universe doesn't operate on human morality. It operates on law. If a baby and a criminal both fall off a building at the same time, they're both hitting the ground. God doesn't stop gravity for the baby because it's innocent, and it doesn't speed it up for the criminal because he's guilty. Good and evil are third-dimensional constructs we use to navigate this experience as a method to establish a degree of order amidst the chaos. So it does have its place, but at the highest levels of spirituality, we are all equally children in the eyes of God. Now, this isn't an exposition against Christianity. I'm referencing it because it's the biggest religion in the world. But all institutionalized religions that teach you're separate from God are less close to the truth than they actually believe they are. And this is relevant to this entire healing conversation, because you can extrapolate what I just said about religious dogma and apply it to any events, circumstances, definitions, and relationships that trigger a feeling of guilt and shame within you. That's why the first direction of forgiveness is towards yourself. And the key emotion that must be completely eradicated out of your frequency are guilt and shame. Guilt and shame are the lowest vibrational emotions that sabotage your heart-mind union. Guilt is the emotional experience of having done something wrong or violated a moral standard. Shame is the painful sensation of humiliation and distress arising from the consciousness of having done something dishonorable, improper, or foolish. 98% of people carry such deep guilt and shame in every aspect of their life that their resonant frequency has become tainted with fear and uncertainty. And without even realizing it, that low vibrational energy quietly sabotages their most preferred manifestations, like the humming of the refrigerator in the silence of your kitchen. It's in the background all the time, and you don't notice it until you isolate the sound in your mind. And you'll notice this self-sabotaging pattern more clearly, especially in moments where you're getting what you don't want. And it's felt in both the big moments and the small moments throughout life. If you're a man and you're afraid to approach a woman you find attractive, that's because you're afraid of getting rejected and looking foolish. If you experience heartbreak from a long-term relationship that ended traumatically, the fear of experiencing that kind of pain again transforms into deep resentment towards the opposite sex, and you block yourself from letting new love in. If you know you want to start a business but keep delaying taking action on it, it's because you're waiting for a perfect moment where there's less uncertainty, procrastinating for years on end, and never really doing anything. If you already do run a business and you know that taking your business to the next level requires you to make a risky investment, but you're fearful of losing what you currently have, you miss out on potentially millions of dollars in ROI, and it's stemming from a fear of failure. And the thing about guilt and shame is that even if you are winning on paper, like you're making exceptional income and you have a big impact with a team of loyal companions around you, low vibrational frequencies will keep you on edge as if the good times won't last. And you can't truly enjoy what you've created with a calm, trusting mind that you deserve the abundance you do have. I see this all the time, especially with the richer, more successful clients I do have, like the imposter syndrome that comes with being in a position of power traps them in this perspective that they're going to get exposed as being a fraud, and they never fully receive their blessings wholeheartedly. In all of these scenarios, which are much more common than you think, believe me, guilt and shame cause an individual to delay the manifestation of their desires by hyper-focusing on the negative aspects of reality and assigning negative definitions to themselves and their world. And much of this can be traced back to a lifetime of societal programming and expectations that perpetuate guilt and shame onto you for not fitting in or playing by other people's rules or meeting certain standards, or even feeling guilty for winning at the highest levels and having all kinds of unfair advantages. Those are the spoils of victory. But in a sense, when things don't go according to the plan, which inevitably happens because that's life, an unhealed, unforgiving soul will experience deep resentment and pain as a byproduct of feeling unworthy of what they do want. I'm elaborating on this so extensively because the point is, stop feeling bad, stop feeling guilty, stop feeling shameful, stop reacting negatively in any capacity to your reality. To truly heal, you must shift from the experiencer of the bad or negative sensations into the observer of it within yourself. To forgive yourself means to fully step out of the perspective as the experiencer of negative circumstances and definitions of reality, and simply observing your reactions and reality the same way God does with us. When you encounter negative circumstances or misfortune, if you approach your world from the perspective as an experiencer, that's when it feels heavy and personal. But if you simply adopt the higher level perspective as an observer, you can encounter the same negative circumstances and misfortune and feel zero loss of frequency. And because you're just observing things happening in reality without any negative definition, your heart and mind maintain a strong, aligned connection. That's the real work required in channeling your manifestation abilities. The work is in emotionally managing your state of being so that you no longer carry any guilt and shame whatsoever. Because the truth is, even if reality isn't going the way you want it to right now, you still have favor with God. You never lose favor. In fact, it's the moment that reality feels the hardest that God is actually carrying you the most. God is holding you together while you take the necessary time and space to remember that you always have access to God's embrace. You never truly lost connection to higher consciousness. You simply dipped in frequency periodically into the dimension of man so that you can understand God better. Because the only way to truly understand and appreciate what God is to know what God is not. So forgive yourself for ever thinking you were a sinner. Forgive yourself for ever believing that your income breakthrough not showing up yet, or your soulmate not showing up, or your ideal life not showing up yet was proof that you did something wrong or you didn't deserve it. Forgive yourself for not remembering that you are a child of God and always have been, with the power to shape your own reality. Forgive yourself for ever believing that you weren't smart enough, capable enough, or deserving enough to receive love, prosperity, and respect, because you are enough right now. And also, I mentioned that the second direction of forgiveness is towards others. In the same way that you absolve yourself of guilt and shame, absolve others of their guilt and shame too. Forgive others for their betrayals and disrespect. Everyone is doing the best they can with what they know, and there are moments where someone's unconscious pain and trauma and ego take over at the worst possible instant, and they simply act out. And most importantly, and I mean this as the single most significant truth that I can ever give to you that will heal generations of guilt and shame, forgive yourself for ever thinking that other people's trespasses had anything to do with your worthiness. Don't take it personal, because most people are too emotionally fragmented to be able to understand that we are all connected at a source consciousness level. And what they project at you is really a projection of themselves. It's not your job to heal other people, they have to heal themselves. But you don't need to carry their weight anymore, because even the most painful thing anyone has ever projected onto you wasn't entirely their fault either. Taking the spiritual high road is always the most life-serving perspective you can ever embody, because the truth is, even the most vicious criminals deserve forgiveness. And this takes a very flexible mind and heart to truly appreciate. But think about it. For someone to commit such atrocities, think about how warped their minds have to be to do such a thing. Are they really even in control of themselves at that point? That could have been you under different circumstances. And that's really the actual point of forgiveness. It's seeing a fragment of yourself in everyone else, because we are all fragments of the same source consciousness. And what you see in another is what you actually see in yourself. And here's what this looks like once it's embodied from a practical perspective, not just understood intellectually. As an entrepreneur, which by the way, I specifically make my content for entrepreneurs and creators, if you haven't guessed that already, but as an entrepreneur, you stop putting soul-crushing pressure on yourself to win, because you genuinely don't care about losing anymore. There's no losing label left to be afraid of. You're secure enough in who you are that failure isn't a verdict on your worth, it's just information and feedback. And because you're not spending all of your energy managing that fear, you end up winning more often. And you end up winning more often because you trust yourself wholeheartedly. Heart and mind reconnect, because the mind is no longer being used as a weapon against you. And once that connection is restored, higher intelligence comes back online. The ideas, the timing, the resourcefulness you thought you'd lost access to come flooding back like a river that breaks through a dam. You never truly lost it, you just buried it under layers of guilt and shame that hadn't been forgiven yet. And this really is the key to manifesting exceptional outcomes. It's very counterintuitive, but it works. Like one of my clients, Ed, who manifested a $24 million real estate deal without really trying to. He had been on a spiritual journey for decades and was quite successful as a real estate developer, but there was still this underlying frequency of staleness that was sabotaging his expansion into genuinely world-class levels. Remnants of people-pleasing tendencies, coupled with a hesitancy to really embrace an elite level of wealth and authority, were humming in the background, and it was manifesting as this perpetual need to keep processing more and more. I identified those patterns for him and shifted his perspective to embody the deepest levels of self-forgiveness, and ultimately got him to realize that enough is enough. He doesn't have to process anything more. He just needs to be completely guilt-free and shameless about who he is and what he wants. And within a few weeks, a $24 million real estate deal landed in his lap, and the way it came up was completely unheard of, to put it in his own words. Once the energetic blockages are mitigated, opportunities for expansion and manifestation come with ease, because heart-mind union create a powerful vortex for abundance of all kinds. Once everything I've just walked you through becomes intuitively integrated and not something you have to remind yourself of, just something you are and know, your healing is complete. Heart and mind come together in perfect harmony, and you cultivate the most powerful frequency characteristic that all high-level manifestors embody. What I'm about to say next is truly what creates unreal magnetism. It's what Ed developed after working with me, and is the result of facilitating forgiveness at the soul level. The highest perspective to embody as the creator of your own universe is part 3, self-permission. Frequency reset causes forgiveness. Forgiveness causes self-permission. Self-permission causes your most abundant reality. This is the highest level of spiritual wisdom there is that grounds itself pragmatically into the third dimension. And it's exactly the wisdom every institution doesn't want you to access. Go back to the religious conversation we had in the last section. They don't want you thinking of yourself as a god over your own reality. That's why they call it blasphemous. It's also why esoteric and occult knowledge gets labeled as dark and dangerous, because the moment you realize your connection to source doesn't run through anyone else, you stop needing them as the middleman. They want to be the ones granting you permission to forgive, or permission to feel worthy, or permission to connect with God at all. But that authority was never theirs to give out in the first place. And you'll start to notice this dependency pattern everywhere once you start to read between the lines, because it doesn't just show up in religion. It's in the way full-grown adults wait for their bosses to grant them permission to go on a vacation or take a day off. It's in the way people wait for their parents' approval before they'll admit to themselves what they actually want out of life. It's in the way people wait for permission for specific holidays to show their love to their families and give them gifts. It's in the way people delay embracing their confidence until they finally adhere to a set of unrealistic expectations made up by society. And newsflash, this whole game of reality is made up, and waiting for permission from anyone to do anything is backwards. Just go do the things you want to do now, regardless of what society tells you. Set your life and your lifestyle up so that you can have complete and total abundance and be the authority over your own world. Life is way too short and uncertain to spend even a moment of time outsourcing your permission to systems and thought forms that don't fully understand your own life's trajectory. And when you do embrace this frequency and start thinking for yourself, you will get resistance. That is inevitable. I mean, literally just try it for yourself and watch what happens. Tell people that you're a god over your own reality, and they'll literally call you delusional. Start talking to your oldest friends about the different reality you're building, and they'll say that you've changed, like that's supposed to be some kind of insult. Speak your actual unapologetic truths instead of the polished, politically correct version you usually give people, and some of them will oppose you, and a lot of times they'll do it violently. Even Jesus couldn't perform miracles in his own hometown, because everyone there knew the old version of him, and so they didn't believe that he was the Messiah. But did that stop him? No, he left, because a prophet is never received well in their own home. That's the real cost of self-permission. You have to be willing to be misunderstood by the very people who used to understand you completely. There's a version of you that lives for the world, constantly performing for its approval, determining every decision through the lens of what people will think. And then there's a different version of you that lives through your own truth, regardless if the world applauds for it or not. Almost everyone defaults to version 1 for their entire life. Only the select few ever find the second. That's the actual difference between an average unhealed person and a fully forgiven soul who has embodied complete self-permission. One is still asking reality for permission to exist as themselves, and the other already gave it to themselves and is simply living through it. When you play the game of reality by your own rules instead of everyone else's, old thought patterns will try to sabotage your confidence because you're venturing into uncharted territory. Your mind has no frame of reference yet for how abundant and supportive reality can be when you unapologetically go after what you want, and it will mistake resistance as you're doing it wrong or you're unworthy. Don't fall for the trap. The truth of the matter is that over time, reality bends to meet you halfway because your frequency becomes too irresistible to ignore. People that used to oppose you now cheer you on, and they're your biggest fans. Systems that used to reject you now celebrate you. What people used to perceive as arrogance or delusion now comes through as confidence and authenticity. And by the way, this is the same gravitational pull that every great thinker, every great artist, leader, and creator throughout history has carried. And it wasn't because they were more talented than everyone else around them. It was because they were completely confident in themselves, regardless of what anyone else decided to believe about them. They assigned their own definitions to reality instead of borrowing everyone else's. And even when they lost, even when misfortune hit, their hearts and minds never wavered, because in their worlds, losing never meant what everyone else thought it meant. They had total self-permission to choose how they experienced their own reality, and only assigned positive definitions to everything that came into their existence. In truth, the one thing that turns average people into extraordinary, exceptional people is their unwillingness to accept other people's labels and definitions for what a successful reality is, and then they go their own way. And then they continue on with their little experiment long enough until collective society agrees that they are great. High-level manifestors embody the notion that in order to be considered a genius, you have to risk being considered a fool first. They know that their freedom in reality reminds other people of the freedom that they have yet to claim in their own lives, and that's what makes self-permission so magnetic. And when your beliefs, your emotions, your thoughts, and your actions are finally operating from that level of spiritual mastery, abundance isn't something you have to chase anymore. It's the side effect of just being yourself. Abundant in love, abundant in money, abundant in status, abundant in intelligence, abundant in freedom. Every category harmonizes at the same time because they were never separate categories to begin with. It was all one frequency expressing itself in different forms. You don't need permission from anyone to connect with God. You never did. You don't need permission from anyone to go after what you want. You never did. You don't need permission to be rich, to be liked, to be respected, to be seen exactly as you are. Because the moment you fully decide in your own heart that your manifestations are already done, without waiting for evidence first, that's the moment reality starts sending you the proof to match what you already know internally. Remember, this game of reality is completely made up, and it will conform to whatever your mind thinks about the game itself. If you think the game is negative and self-defeating, then so it is. However, shift into the positive polarity of complete confidence and freedom, and that will be true too. Because that really is what manifestation actually is. It was never about materializing your desires itself. It was about aligning your frequency to the point where you no longer need to see the manifestation before you give yourself permission to claim it. Permission first, then you manifest. You reset your frequency, forgive yourself and others, and completely embody self-permission, then reality adjusts to meet the confident vibration you're already radiating. Even the fact that you're watching this video right now is proof that the right tools and mental structures are coming online for you to manifest your most preferred reality. Otherwise, you wouldn't have found this video in the first place. The tools to cultivate this kind of aligned frequency were always there, you just didn't remember. But now that you do remember, you can confidently say that your healing process is complete. And now you can move on to bigger, more exciting aspects of life that feel more expansive. And if this video resonated with you and you want to further reinforce the teachings that the elite know but will never tell you, I did a video breaking down the 4 most powerful truths surrounding reality creation. You can tap the link on the screen here to go watch it now.